Adi, welcome here. We're kicking this off from the traditional and unceded territory of the Clay First Nation, and it's a beautiful place to live and work and learn together, and I'm looking forward to doing just that. Today's session, this topic, briefly here in the next 10-ish minutes, is about learner engagement in online learning. And I want to set up our instructional skills workshop with this topic as your first kind of discussion topic we're going to get you thinking about and talking about a little bit together in this course. To prime you a little bit, I'd like to use this question to get you thinking about your personal experience as a learner. So take out something to write on. You're going to need some extra space, but on one side of it, list some things. Take a moment, pause the video for a minute or two, and list a number of things you like to do while learning. Probably think about kind of formal learning experiences in a course or with a group or a workshop or a class, maybe a meeting where you're taking something in. What do you like to do? What comes to mind? And list some of those things for yourself. We're going to build on that here today and throughout this course a little bit as our module learning outcome that's most relevant here for this course is around exploring resources and sharing ideas for learner engagement. In two things, in synchronous and asynchronous online learning, two different modalities of learning. We'll look at those in a minute. And one way to reframe that kind of outcome is as a question. The question might be, how do we support learner engagement in online learning? Again, we'll be looking at that today and in this discussion that'll follow. So here's those two modalities we just talked about. Synchronous is what we think of in a online meeting, a virtual classroom, presentations, text, any of those things where it's all happening live. People are together, live, connecting, audio, video, text in a live fashion or modality. Whereas asynchronous is all the other types of learning we can engage with, where people are doing it on their own time or on their own schedule. And there's a list of examples there. So we're thinking about these two modalities. We're going back to some work from the 19th century here, where Garrison, Archer, and Anderson developed this model. And I'm going to encourage you to sketch this out on the other side of your piece of paper. We're going to use this and build on this and just define this a little bit in the next few minutes. This came out of their interest in the quality of the learning experience, particularly as online modalities were becoming more common, which is why we're going back to the 90s here. You'll see this mentioned and used in a number of places. They were analyzing the educational experiences of students and of learners. They settled on these three elements, and they defined these elements as critical prerequisites in a successful educational experience. I love that. Critical prerequisites. These are the ingredients. This is the secret sauce. Their title, they were about community, right? Talking about collaboration, talking about working together, learning together, and inquiry in the sense that we're curious, we're asking for, we're looking for information. So that's the spirit of this model here. We're going to define kind of all of it, but another way to frame it, they use the word presence for these three kind of areas: cognitive, social, and teaching. We could also talk about the type of interaction that's happening there, or the type of engagement that's happening there. So cognitive is kind of about the learner and the content engaging together and what that engagement looks like. Social, more so learner to learner, and teaching, learner to instructor. So you might think of that also as social, but in this case, they're talking about teaching as the way the learners are interacting with their instructor. Social more so in a peer sense of learner to learner. Here's the first. In cognitive presence, they defined this cognitive presence in three ways. It was about critical thinking, personal meaning, and shared understanding within this secret sauce model of theirs. Critical thinking as in like higher order thinking, both as part of the learning process. As we're learning, we're getting to some higher order, bigger picture, more complex thinking, but also as an outcome, as an outcome of the learning process. That's kind of one of the ultimate goals, is we get to that level, that ability, that place in our learning that we can do that. And they said that cognitive presence is something that needs to be both created, initiated, and sustained. So welcoming new ideas, making new connections, avoiding things like putting down ideas, are part of creating a space for an environment of experience of cognitive presence. And they describe this as a dynamic relationship between these other two kind of key factors, between personal meaning and shared understanding. So the learner's personal world, the learner's personal experiences, educational life, professional, otherwise, personal, otherwise, and then shared understanding, right? So this community of inquiry, how are we sharing what's happening? How are we sharing our ideas with one another, respecting and bringing together and celebrating the diverse perspectives and ideas that may be a part of that? Um, and this cognitive presence, there's also, we talked about creating it and sustaining it. So they were thinking about it throughout the learning journey, as new learning is introduced, as it's explored, as connections are made, and as it culminates in some kind of act, some kind of demonstration or purposeful application of the learning. Finally, they explored the influence of modality. This is back to our synchronous live and our asynchronous on your own time modalities of online learning. So oral communication in a live synchronous fashion can encourage dialogue and critical thinking, whereas written communication, which may happen asynchronously on your own time, can be more explicit. It tends to encourage more thoughtful reflection as somebody kind of crafts their thinking into a written statement. So this is kind of intertwined, right? Is this idea of the secret sauce and this idea of how modality affects it. Last thing on this one, this cognitive presence. These authors felt that alone was not enough to sustain a community of learners, especially in a critical way. But to get to those higher order thinking skills, we need more. We need social presence next. Let's look at that. So social presence defined by these three things in terms of its kind of makeup, its character, its composition, some emotional expression, some open communication, some group cohesion. It's authentic, it's personal in the engagement that's there. These characteristics, again, may differ from modality to modality. Emotional expression might look like emojis in an online environment, whereas in a live environment, online asynchronous environment, we're in a live synchronous environment, we have tone, we have body language, we can see and perceive all of those things. There's a different experience of emotional expression. Open communication might look like, safe spaces, ways we create safe spaces, some risk-free expression, what that looks like, and everything that comes with it in that openness. Group cohesion might look like icebreaker activities, collaborative activities, tasks to bring people together. Garrison, Anderson, and Archer use this description. They said social, emotional interaction and support are important, sometimes essential, when realizing meaningful and worthwhile educational outcomes. So I love that idea of kind of that investment in that social emotional interaction. Finally, social presence also distinguishes from people just downloading information, right? It's more than just kind of that independent experience of downloading information and learning independently. But again, this idea of collaborative learning in a community of inquiry really needs that sense of social presence. Finally, teaching presence is about two things, two key ingredients. Design. So it's the way we set up, we select, we organize, we present curriculum, we assess, we evaluate teaching and learning activities. That design is part of teaching presence. And then that facilitation throughout the learning process is really the other side of teaching presence. They describe this, the authors describe this as the binding element that brings together cognitive presence and social presence. It's not just about teacher-centered activities and views, but the focus rather instead is on the students creating meaning and confirming their own understanding. And the instructors therefore really just facilitate both cognitive and social presence in this model. So coming back to your list, now with that context, with a bit of that description and those definitions of the secret sauce, I wonder if you can associate the items on your list, maybe number them, and maybe put some of those numbers into those three different areas of that Venn diagram. Where do they sit? Maybe they kind of sit at the intersection, excuse me, of more than one, but draw some lines connecting them or move those numbers over. Take a minute and do that as we reflect on this. So here's some additional language that Garrison, Anderson, and Archer used to describe this overlap. And I think as you look at where your tendencies, where your preferences are, I think it's useful to think about, what do we do at the intersection, and how does our teaching presence support both cognitive and social presence? The diagram's flipped here, but you see teaching presence at the intersection of teaching presence and cognitive presence being about selecting content. That's our role there, right? The content we select, the activities we select help create and sustain that cognitive presence. On the left, as teaching interactions intersect, with the social presence, we're also setting a climate. Again, partly through the activities we select, but partly through the ways we conduct that learning experience, the ways we we greet students into the room, or by name, or learn their names early, or ask them to learn one another's names. Maybe the way we expect them to learn from or respond to one another. It's all about that climate that creates the healthy conditions for social presence. And then across that social and cognitive presence, this is where our role is far more in facilitating. We're supporting discourse. We're engaging the students as resources for one another socially as they engage with the content and with the learning, with the cognitive presence. We're supporting a discourse there. So I love these descriptions of what engagement looks like, and we'll be working on kind of layering that in to our learning around live synchronous online learning and asynchronous online learning where we're learning and students are learning on their own time. So 2 questions there to leave you with in summarizing this and kind of helping assess and clarify for you, consolidate for you what we've just talked about. Where would you like to grow? In which of these areas? Maybe put a star and then write in for yourself, how can you do that in this course? What do you want to try? Do you want to try one new thing? Do you want to read about one new thing? Do you want to practice one new thing? Do you want to practice something you're already doing but using it more or using it differently? What does that look like for you? So thanks so much for checking this out. I look forward to seeing what you share in this upcoming discussion activity and then applying this with you in the weeks to come in the course. Cheers. Oh, sorry. Here's the references for you. Make these slides available so you can check these resources out individually as well if you're interested. Thanks.